Still on the third part, specific data to look for when analyzing major economies, and it is time to look for the GDP. Now what we are doing out of this project is we are looking at different economies in the world, five major economies in the world: United States of America, Eurozone, United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. And we'll try to see what are the most important indicators to take into consideration when trading the currency markets. Because if you are trading binary options, for example, here in our binaryoptions.net.au, then regardless of the option that you are trading, you should look, for example, the majority of binary options are being based on the currency market. So the asset that you are choosing is based on the currency markets. So in order to understand what moves the currency markets, you need to take into consideration the fundamental analysis as well. Why am I saying as well? Because technical analysis is important. And besides technical analysis, you need to have fundamental analysis as well. Now, this is the first economy we are looking for. This is the United States of America, and it is time to take a look at the GDP. The Q /Q that you see there on the screen means GDP, gross domestic product, quarter over quarter. It is a quarterly release, and this is the 24th indicator that we are looking at. And the GDP basically gives you the information if a specific economy is in a recession or in expansion mode. So if it is positive, it is expanding, or not in a recession. But if it is negative, is in recession. So this is extremely important. So the GDP stands for gross domestic product, and it represents the annualized change in the value of all goods and services produced by an economy. The GDP number comes in three releases, and this is extremely important. First of all, it is the advanced GDP being released, then the preliminary GDP, and then the final GDP. Out of those three releases, the first one, the advanced GDP, is the most important one. Why? Because after the first release, traders already have a glimpse or an idea or an educated guess about the real number, or the final number the GDP will have at the revised and preliminary releases. Revisions may look different, but there is usually only small deviations from the actual number released when the advanced GDP was issued, with the exception that something terrible or terrifying is happening in between, and that should be viewed anyways in the indicators that are being released on the monthly basis, and it should come with no surprises. Usually, what major investment houses do after the advanced GDP, and let's say that I don't know, industrial production or services PMI and so on and so forth came better than expectations or lower than expectations, then they will revise the GDP estimate for the final number, and so the market will know all the time the let's say the possible final print for the GDP. Now, because this data is released on a quarterly basis, it is multiplied by 4. The GDP is the broadest measure of economic activity, like I said earlier, and the primary gauge of economic health. So when data is released and it goes negative, for example, it shows an economy in recession and troubles on the horizon. Once again, the GDP stands for the gross domestic product, annualized change in the values of all goods and services produced by the economy. So all goods and services produced by the economy. It is released by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and the release date is quarterly, about 60 days after the quarter ends, but that will come a bit later. It comes in three releases, like mentioned earlier: advanced GDP, preliminary, and final, with the advanced GDP being the most important one. It is highly volatile trading environment when the GDP is announced, both before the announcement and after the announcement. It is on a quarterly basis, and it should be multiplied by 4. have to keep in mind that the GDP is the broadest measure of economic activity, and it signals economic health. If it is coming below expectations, and most important, if it's coming on the negative side, it signals contraction, recession, and that is not good for economy. Now, the most important things to take into consideration when looking at the GDP indicator are the following. The release date. It is being released on the quarterly basis, about 60 days after the quarter end. So about 60 days after the quarter ends. The release time is 12:30 GMT during the North American trading session, and it brings extreme volatility levels, especially if it goes on the negative side, because on the negative side, or when the surprise, so to say, is on the lower side, when it is missing estimates, as traders say, the panic element comes to add fuel to the regular selling, and you have a more accelerated move to the downside. Here is a first year data. It is one of the most important releases of any economy, not only the United States, and it is closely watched by market participants. After all, it defines the line in the sand between recession and expansion. After this GDP, of course, we are not going to take a look at the 6 month based comparison for the GDP, because this one comes on the quarterly basis, and it doesn't make any sense to look over the past 6 quarters. If you want, you can do that. Normally, things changing that much, we are considering the monthly data is more important. Moving on, and slowly but surely we are approaching the end analysis for the United States of America, and we'll look at the personal income, then the personal spending. They go most likely both hand in hand, and then the final indicator we're going to take a look is the pending home sales, but this on the next recordings. So once again, on the GDP, to keep in mind, gross domestic product, quarterly released 60 days after the quarter ends, and it comes in three releases: advanced, preliminary, and final. The advanced is the most important one, released 12:30 GMT. So if you're looking for things to move, if you're looking for volatility, then 12:30 GMT, when the GDP is going to be released, is one of the most the most important moments to be in the market. Now stay tuned for the next recording, and under the next recording we are going to cover the personal income and the personal spending on the same recording, as they are interconnected, so to say. So stay tuned please for the next recording.